Alrighty. Hi, folks. If there's anyone out there, if you could just chat in the box and let me know that you can hear me, that would be awesome. And we will get started in about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. And hopefully, I'm doing this right. Hey, Amy. Can you hear me, Amy? Awesome. Fantastic. Trying to figure out how I can tell who is on this, but hopefully it'll show up in the live chat or the chat section. Awesome. Okay. So I'll give it about another 2 minutes or so, and then we will definitely get started. Well, I can tell you that today is definitely better than yesterday. So I lost power for about 24 hours, and so we were on generator for the last 24 hours. So that was pretty interesting. And but I have to admit, for the last 24 hours, I was still able to watch TV, get on the internet. So that was super cool. So all right, we'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, folks, my name is Rich Hatch. I am the owner of Triumph Endurance Coaching. Um, and I just want to say that outside of being a coach for the last 5 years, I'm also an athlete. So I've been a USAT Level 1 coach for the last 5 years. I've been a triathlete for probably the last 12 or 13 years. I've done 4 Ironmans. I've done 8 half Ironmans. I've qualified for the Boston Marathon twice. So I have the ability to have the perspective of being an athlete and a coach, which, when I'm coaching athletes, I kind of hearken upon that all the time of, okay, how did I feel in this situation as an athlete? So that's a great experience to have. I'd like to thank Kathleen Walker, Andy Sherding, and Amy Woods for having me here today to discuss race pacing and race nutrition. And it's funny because it's one of those topics where, and I tell my athletes this all the time, that you could bang out every single workout leading into your A race, and you could nail every workout. But if you screw up race nutrition or race pacing, it's going to be a super long day for you, especially in the long races. So It's one of those things where you really kind of need to nail it, and it was one of those things where I was like, okay, this could be the perfect topic for having a discussion for today. So, as we start this, I'll be the first person to tell you I don't have every single answer that you might ask me. So, but if you do have a question and I do not have the answer for it, I'm hoping I have most of the answers, but if I don't, I'll jot down your name, and I have a plethora of resources that I can draw upon, and I will get back to you with an answer if I do not have one myself. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm going to start out with a disclaimer, and that disclaimer is I know that people get pretty passionate about their race nutrition. People love so many different brands of nutrition out there, and I'm not going to tell you that your nutrition is good, and I'm not going to tell you your nutrition is bad. If it works for you, fantastic. I'm going to tell you what we recommend to our athletes to make them as successful as possible. So, with that being said, how many people have done a race, a half marathon, a half Ironman, an Ironman, and they've gotten this gassy, uncomfortable feeling in their stomach while they're racing? And I know I have, and I'm sure many of you have as well. And that uncomfortable feeling actually has a name. It's called goo gut. And so I know that especially Ironman athletes, they kind of get this sensation all the time. And so really that sensation comes down to too many carbohydrates in your small intestine. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today is what you should be drinking in terms of how much potassium, how much sodium, how much carbohydrates that you should have in your sports drinks, and kind of what you should be looking for. So let's get started. So how does your sports drink, how does goo, how does chomps, how does chews, how does real food get into your body? And the first thing you do is, of course, you drink it. It goes down into your stomach, and at that point, it goes into your small intestine. And your small intestine is it's like a pressurized system, where if it has the correct electrolytes, it will pass through the sodium and carbohydrates and everything right through the small intestinal wall and into your bloodstream. So your small intestine handles 95% of all your fluid absorption in your body. So it's important that we're putting the correct amount of electrolytes into your small intestine. Okay, so with that being said, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, okay, right. So if we were to take water, we were to drink water, it would go into your small intestine. At that point, your body would look at it and go, I don't know what to do with this. It has nothing. It has no potassium. It has no sodium. It has no carbohydrates. What am I going to do with this? And so to get it to be kind of, that correct balance of electrolytes, it actually has to pull those from different sources of your body. So it has to pull the sodium from different spaces of your body, or carbohydrates, to get it to that correct concentration so that it can pass it on into your bloodstream. So it's one of those things where it's really important that you're kind of putting the correct amount of electrolytes into your small intestine, just so that it flows through into your bloodstream as fast as possible, so that you can kind of see those benefits immediately. So let's think about this for a second. What is the main point of hydration? Hydration is to really get that kind of the circulation of of all these electrolytes to your muscles, and at the same time, it's kind of picking up that waste in terms of like a lactic acid, but it's really just circulating and getting these nutrients to your muscles. Well, if you get dehydrated, what happens is that your blood becomes thicker. It becomes more viscous, and when it gets thicker, your heart rate goes up, your power kind of goes down, your core temperature goes up, and your performance declines. So what you really want to do is you want to be staying hydrated at all times with the correct electrolytes so that it comes into your small intestine, it flows through the intestinal wall, it goes into your blood, it circulates, it fuels your muscles. So that's kind of what it looks like in a perfect world. So, what is the correct amount of electrolytes that you should be putting into your body? So, I created a little printout here just in case folks are going to be watching this later. But the correct amount of electrolytes you want to be putting into your body is 225 milligrams of sodium per 8 fluid ounces, 9 grams of carbohydrates per 8 fluid ounces, and about 60 to 70 milligrams of potassium per 8 fluid ounces. Now you want to remember, you do not want to put more than 90 grams of carbohydrates into your system per hour. And those 90 grams of carbohydrates has to come from 2 different carbohydrate sources. So, I'll get into it in a second in terms of what are different carbohydrate sources, but it's important that we choose. There are some carbohydrate sources that might be a little bit better than other carbohydrate sources, and so we can talk about that in a second. But in essence, we didn't invent this. I wish I could say that I just came out of a laboratory and I invented the 225 milligrams of sodium. No, I mean, all of this is science, and we really follow the lead of specific doctors that have come up with this. So we followed the lead of Dr. Stacy Sims. So she wrote the book Roar. She also invented the sports drink Osmo. We followed the lead of Dr. Alan Lim. He came up with the sports drink Scratch, and he was also the head nutritionist on 2 different Tour de France teams. I think it was Team Garmin and Team Radio Shack. And then also, I just came back from a conference in Arizona, and I listened to the head nutritionist from Team Sky in the Tour de France. And they also recommend to their athletes not to take more than 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So remember, those 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour have to come from 2 different carbohydrate sources. So, let's go back to our small intestine again. We have different electrolytes that come into our small intestine, and we have receptors within that small intestine. And a receptor will say, okay, I can take in sucrose, I can take in glucose. A different receptor would say, I can take in glucose. A different receptor might say, okay, I can take in fat. I can take in sodium. And what happens is that these receptors take in all these different electrolytes. But it cannot take in more than 60 grams of one carbohydrate source. So that's the reason why we say all your sports drinks and all your gels and chews need to be multiple or different carbohydrate sources. That gives you the ability to take in up to 90 grams of carbohydrates. Your body can actually process 90 grams of carbohydrates if you take in 2 different carbohydrate sources. So, what are some of the better carbohydrate sources that you could possibly take in? Glucose, sucrose, cane sugar, dextrose. Those are better solutions than, say, maltodextrin and fructose. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, well, wait a second, Rich. There's a ton of products out there that have fructose or fructose or a maltodextrin. And you would be right. There's a ton of them out there. And I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying that the way that your body metabolizes them is a little bit different. So number one, if it's maltodextrin or fructose, it can cause an upset stomach. And so I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying that you really need to practice with it a lot in advance before your A race, just to make sure that your stomach can handle it. And number two, the way your body metabolizes, especially fructose, is different than all the other carbohydrates. So fructose it actually goes to your liver. It metabolizes it in the liver, and then it really loves to hold on to it. And then whatever's left over, it passes it into your bloodstream. Where the rest of them, remember, all the rest of the carbohydrates come into your small intestine, pass through the intestinal wall into your bloodstream, and you get that kind of almost immediate performance boost. So, some of the sports drinks that we kind of recommend, I shouldn't say kind of recommend, we do recommend to our athletes are the following sports drinks. So, I'll post that here. I know I'm putting this in front of my face, but Osmo, Active Hydration, Scratch Labs, Noon Hydration, and Goo Hydration. And why are we selecting these four? Because they fit within that mold of 225 milligrams of sodium, around 9 grams of carbohydrates, and between 60 and 70 grams of potassium. So that's kind of the sweet spot that, and I know there's many drinks out there, and but I would definitely take a look at those and see if they're good for you, and maybe experiment with those, because those have the correct amount of electrolytes that they can come into your small intestine and be absorbed into your body immediately. So now the next question you should be asking me is, okay, cool. You've told me good carbohydrates, bad carbohydrates, what to drink, etc. How do I know how much to drink? And that's a good question. How much do you drink? Well, there's two different ways that you can determine how much you drink. One is that you can kind of go with the general rule. And so I have a printout here of the general rule. And the general rule is 0.10 ounces per pound of body weight if the temperature outside is less than 75 degrees. So, for example, if you are a 120-pound woman, you are looking at around 12 ounces per hour if the temperature is below 75 degrees. If the temperature is above 80 degrees, then you're looking at 0.15 ounces per hour. So that same 120-pound woman would drink about 18 ounces of sport drink. So this whole methodology here is for men or women. It's actually a general rule. So now, of course, there's going to be outliers, but it's a good starting point. So if it's 80 degrees, it's 0.15. If it's below 75 degrees, it's 0.10. But the best way, and the way that I have all my athletes determine how much they should be drinking, is we actually do a sweat rate test. So what I do is I email them an Excel spreadsheet, and I ask them to do their sweat rate test at the temperature of expected race day. So, for example, I have a ton of athletes doing Ironman Mont Tremblant on August 23rd. Well, hopefully. And the average temperature on Ironman Mont Tremblant on August 23rd is 63 degrees. So what we do is I will ask my athletes to go out and do a workout at around 63 degrees, and with their expected race pace, so their heart rates or their pacing or their power or etc. But before they actually go out and do that workout, I have them step on a scale naked, holding all of their nutrition in their hands. So if they're going out for a 2-hour ride, they might be holding 2 bottles in their hand. They might be holding some goo packets in their hand. And they're holding all that in their hands, standing on the scale naked, and they weigh themselves. They jot it down. They go out, they do their 2-hour ride. They come back, they towel off, they stand back on the scale naked, holding all of those empty bottles and empty packages, and then they write down their weight. And at that point, they plug it into the Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet tells us what their fluid loss is over the course of those 2 hours. So now, one of the things that you want to remember is that it isn't that fluid loss there are some things in there. So there could be waste in the body. Um, I don't want to get specific, but you know what I mean. There could be waste in the body, and you did just do a workout, so there is some glycogen burned and stuff like that. So usually I will take those fluid ounces. I'll take off about 10 to 15%, and I'll say, okay, this is how many ounces of fluid you sweat per hour. So I find that that's probably a little bit more of an accurate test. And then at that point, I start working with the athletes way in advance. So if their A race is in August, at this point, they're already working on their race nutrition and making sure that it's working with their body so that come race day, there's nothing new. They've been using the same nutrition for 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months in advance. And so come race day, their body's like, okay, yeah, scratch. Cool, I'm used to scratch, let's go. So that's kind of how we deal with things in terms of, figuring out what the fluid loss is for different athletes. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, so you've just told me, what to look for in sport drinks. You've told me what types of sports drinks to look for. But how do you handle kind of the gels and the chomps and chews and the food? Say if you want to eat food on your course, how do you handle that? And to be honest with you, it really comes down to a game of math, right? So you would document, okay, this is how much sport drink I'm going to be drinking per hour on the bike. And if I take this gel packet of goo and it's 22 carbohydrates, then that will keep me under the 90 grams of carbohydrates. I have some athletes out there that they love e-gel. But the problem with e-gel is it's very heavy in carbohydrates, and it's tough to get that to work with their sport drink. So it just comes down to kind of a game of math in terms of trying to get that to work with their physiology, So, okay, so that is kind of the gist in terms of race fueling. I figure at this point I will step into race pacing, and then I will just take all of your questions at the end instead of kind of dividing up the presentation. But like I said, there's 2 parts of this at the beginning of this presentation. One part was, okay, race fueling. If you nail your race fueling and you nail your race pacing, you're setting yourself up for a good day. So let's kind of talk about race pacing. So race pacing, you have to remember, you cannot race every single race with the same exact way. You cannot race a marathon the same way that you would race a 5K, right? A 5K, you're going all out. A marathon, you can't go all out for 26 miles. So you need to, you need to control yourself, in essence. But I've kind of put together some efforts in terms of what people should be thinking about in terms of different race distances. So there's an old adage, kind of speak to the level of your audience. And to be honest with you, I don't know if the audience here knows about power meters. I don't know if they know about heart rate zones or if they just go by rate of perceived effort. So I'm going to try in each race, try to just kind of nail each one a little bit pretty quickly without having this presentation kind of drag on. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me afterwards, and I can get kind of a little bit more specific with your particular instance. So 5K, let's start out at a 5K. A 5K in general should be raced hard. You should be redlining it the entire time. You have to make sure that you don't go out too hard, but you should be really on that edge the entire 3.1 miles. In terms of heart rate zones, you should be starting out at the bottom of zone 5, which is, and I use the Sally Edwards for running heart rate zones, zone 5, and working your way over the course of that 3.1 miles through zone 5 to where when you're getting to the end, you are at the top of zone 5 and you are, coming close to your max heart rate by that end of that race. So it's really an almost all out hard effort. 10K is pretty much the same exact way. You're going to start out racing hard again, but you're going to probably start out for heart rate athletes in zone 4, and you're going to work your way through zone 4. So as those miles tick off, and you go from 1 to mile 2, you should be going from maybe the beginning of zone 4 to the middle of zone 4 at mile 2 to the top of zone 4 by mile 3 to the bottom of zone 5 by mile 4, and working your way through that for that 10K. So you are running very hard. And so it's one of these efforts where you just don't want to leave anything on the table. The thing I just want to remind you is that for 10Ks, you don't want to be going out too hard, right? So remember, you want to build into that. So that's why I said start at zone 4 and build into it, so that by the end, you're completely exhausted by the end of that 6.2 miles, and you've given everything that you have. So I know that's kind of a classic mistake of a lot of folks. Half a marathon. Okay, so here we go. Half marathon for the heart rate athletes. I tell my heart rate athletes that they should be running lactate heart rate plus 2 beats per minute. Now, some people might say, well, wait a second. Lactate heart rate plus 2 beats per minute. Lactate heart rate is what I can hold for 1 hour or longer. And with the average heart rate that I can hold for 1 hour or longer. So why would you go 2 beats per minute? More than that. And I would say, well, you'll never get a new lactate heart rate if you don't try to race a little bit higher than that. Now, you might not be able to, and you might come back down to lactate heart rate, but I have found to be pretty successful that if I shoot for lactate heart rate plus 2 beats per minute, a lot of the athletes can do that, or they slip right back down to lactate heart rate. For those that deal with kind of heart rate, your half marathon, you really should be kind of looking at the middle of zone 4. That's where lactate heart rate usually falls. So if you know your heart rate zones, you can probably draw a line right around zone 4, and your lactate heart rate will be right around that area. If you're going by rate of perceived effort, and you're doing a half marathon, you might be wanting to race somewhere in the 7 to 7.5 range of rate of perceived effort. Somewhere I would maybe even 8, so 7 to 8. I mean, you're still running hard, but you really want to keep your eye on that lactate heart rate. Next, let's talk about the marathon. So, the marathon, I have a wide range that I tell my athletes to run the marathon at. And that range is minus 3 beats per minute of lactate heart rate to minus 8 beats of lactate heart rate. So I know it's a big range, but it really comes down to mental fortitude. I have some athletes that are very comfortable being uncomfortable, and they are able to stay in that pain zone for a long time at minus 3 beats per minute and get through an entire marathon. Where I have others that are really not that good at being uncomfortable. And so you really need to kind of know your athlete. You really need to know yourself and where you fall in that category. So I have one woman that I can think of that she's a minus 3 beats per minute less than their lactate heart rate. No doubt about it. Where I have a man who is not as comfortable being uncomfortable, and he's more of a minus 8 beats per minute less than his lactate heart rate. So kind of keep that in mind. In terms of rate of perceived effort, you should be running your marathon at probably around a 6 or a 7, probably closer to, I would say, let's call it 6.5 of your rate of perceived effort. So you're definitely not running easy pace. You're definitely running faster than easy pace, no doubt about it. So um, next, let me just grab a drink because my throat is a little dry. All right. Next, let's talk about triathlon. So, triathlon, again, because of the nature of the race, in general, it's pretty short. It's usually between like an hour and 5 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes. And so each discipline for a sprint triathlon is generally raced red line all out per discipline. So that's an easy one, right? It's you should be really kind of at the top of zone 4, maybe even kind of going into zone 5. Your rate of perceived effort should be very high. It probably should be, somewhere in the 8.5, 9 range for a sprint triathlons, just because they are over so quickly. Olympic triathlons, a little bit different. So if you have a power meter on your bike, those should be ridden around 90% of your functional threshold power. Those should be your functional threshold power. If you're dealing with heart rate zones, that's probably low zone 4 in the Andy Coggan heart rate zones. So if you're a power athlete, it's about 90% of your FTP. If you're a heart rate athlete, it's about low zone 4 in your bike heart rate zones. In terms of running, again, it's kind of like a 10. I mean, it is a 10K, but you want to start out in low zone 4, and you kind of want to build into that as those miles tick through. So it's like low zone 4, mile 1, middle of zone 4, mile 2, top of zone 4, mile 3, and kind of working your way through those zones. So when you're finished, you've left it all on the table, and there's nothing left in the tank. So that's kind of the Olympic distance. Excuse me, half Ironman. This is where you need to start showing control. This is where you need to start showing discipline. So half Ironmans in general should be raced around 80% of your functional threshold power. Or if you're dealing with heart rate zones, this should be around the top of zone 3 of the Andy Coggan scale, heart rate zones. They need to be raced very evenly paced. So you do not want to be burning matches. You do not want to, crush going up that hill. All these power surges are just wasted energy that you will not have later on in the race, right? So if you're a power athlete, you want to race with a low variability index, or what they call a VI. So you want your VI to be around 1.05 or less. So how do I explain VI? Really quickly, you have your normalized power, you have your average power. You want those two numbers to kind of be as close to each other as possible. So I tell my athletes, this is a disciplined race. You need to race with your brains, not with your balls. If you're on the bike and your buddies blow past you, let them go. Stay on your heart rate, stay on your power number. You will catch them later on in the race, or you will catch them on the run, because you didn't burn matches. You raced it very evenly paced. Once you get off that bike, because you were disciplined, you will be able to run well. And that's where you're going to catch all your buddies. So, the run, you should be thinking about doing that run around minus 4 beats of your lactate heart rate. So, again, your lactate heart rate is around the middle of zone 4. So, just put it in that perspective, that you really want to be coming out and you really want to be running hard, and you will be able to run hard if you're disciplined on the bike. And you can definitely be in zone 4. And as the miles go on, just kind of, turn the key a little bit more and making it a little bit tougher and a little bit tougher. But you should definitely be able to run within about minus 4 beats of your lactate heart rate. So that's something to consider. Again, Ironman racing, you need to be just as disciplined, or even more disciplined with Ironman racing than half Ironman racing. So Ironman racing, it's a long day. And so if you're a power athlete, you should be looking at power numbers of about 70% of your FTP. Which 70% of your FTP, if you are a heart rate athlete, that is around the top of zone 2, the very bottom of zone 3. And I say very bottom, I mean very bottom of zone 3. And again, it's all about not burning matches. So you want to ride it very evenly paced. You want a low variability index. You do not want power surges. Again, race with your brains, not with your balls. And if you race disciplined, you will be able to get off that bike and you will be able to run well in an Ironman. So if you've done an Ironman before, if you've seen an Ironman before, you've seen a lot of people walking. If you nail your race nutrition, if you nail your pacing, you will be able to come off that bike and you will be able to run well in Ironman racing. The run should probably be around -8 to -10, and I know it's tough telling people how they should be able to run in an Ironman because I've been there myself, and it's just like, okay, let's just get out there and do it. But it's my job to coach, and I would say that you should be able to run about a -8 to a -10 beats less than your lactate heart rate. So that should be top of zone 3, bottom of zone 4, somewhere kind of in that range. So I've kind of stepped through all the races and kind of, the pacing. As you can see, the longer the race, the more disciplined you definitely need to be. Keep that in mind, especially in Ironman racing. You could just have a pretty good bike and then come off and just wow a lot of people with a huge run. If you're disciplined and you stay on your heart rate or your power, you could kind of have a really big day. So, okay, so I've touched upon nutrition, I've touched upon pacing, and now I'm at the point where I have nothing more to add. I would love to hear your questions, and we can kind of go through, and I'll try to answer any questions that you have. So if you want to put them into chat, we can go from there. Let's see if I have any questions. Amy Woods, will you post a picture of that here on this thread after? Yes, I will. I will post a picture of all of these slides I made, just so that you can have them in the thing. All right. What else do we have? Okay, Amy Woods. She is a big fan of Stacy Sims. She has changed the game for female athletes. I'm so happy to hear this. Any tips for nutrition for sprint races? So this is usually how I handle sprint races. I make sure that when I go into sprint races, I go in very well hydrated. Before the race starts, about 45 minutes before the race starts, I'll hit the porta potty because I am so hydrated. I'll hit the porta potty. I'll do a quick pee and I'll do a quick poop, and then I will take about 2 gels, chased with 2 to 4 ounces of water. A lot of people don't do that, and so if you take a look at a lot of the gel packages out there, you really need to chase those with 2 to 4 ounces of water. The reason why is because those are really just super concentrated forms of carbohydrates, and you really need that water to kind of water down that carbohydrate. So again, when it comes into your small intestine, it can pass right through and get into your bloodstream. So I usually put down 2 gels just before the sprint. I make sure that I go in very hydrated. The thing is that the sprint is so short in duration and nature. As long as you go in hydrated, you really don't need to pour a ton of carbohydrates or sodium in your body. What your body has in it naturally should be able to be more than enough to get you through your race. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay. have you heard of SOS? Amy, I have not heard of SOS, unless you're talking about um, SIS. And then if you have, I have too, and that is actually in the that is actually the nutrition that Team Sky actually uses. And so, but when I've compared their nutritional information, and for one reason or another, it didn't make the cut. So, but I can relook at that with you if you want to. I have heard about Tailwind, so I think I have Tailwind pulled up on a spreadsheet right here. So yeah, Tailwind, carbohydrates. So again, I'm looking for around 9 grams of carbohydrates per 8 fluid ounces. That's kind of the recommendation of Alan Lamb. That's kind of the recommendation of Stacy Sims. Tailwind, 25 grams of carbohydrates per 8 fluid ounces. So though and it has 303 milligrams of sodium, and potassium, it has 88 milligrams. So it just has way too many carbs for my liking. Like I said, if it works for you, that's great. It's probably not one of those drinks that I would be recommending to my athletes because, again, we don't want to have more than 90 grams of carbs per hour. Okay, Amy just asked about carbs, so Tailwind, so I answered that. Okay, yep, Sandy just replied, 25 grams of carbs per 8 fluid ounces. Dave just said that high carbohydrate intake contributes to GI distress. You are correct, Dave. Kathleen Walker, super helpful sports drink ratios. I have heard you should drink your electrolytes and eat your carbs, gels, gummies to avoid GI distress. And so, yeah, so it sounds like, Amy, you're a fan of Stacy Sims. She kind of has, what is her saying? It's nutrition in the bottle, food in the pocket. And so she is a big proponent of getting your hydration within all of those criteria that I gave you earlier, but also eating kind of real food. So, like, what kind of real foods should you be eating? Like pretzel bites, jelly beans, Swedish fish, tablespoon of nuts, salted potatoes, what else? Turkey jerky. So there is different types of food that she kind of recommends that you can eat as real food on the course. And so I am a proponent. She is not as big of a fan with the gels. I am a little bit more of a fan of the gels, just from the convenience factor, and you can kind of portion out what you're taking over the course of a race day a little bit easier, in my opinion. But she's more of a fan of the food, and but we can make that all work. Again, it's really just taking in and making sure that you kind of have those right ratios. So, Mary asked, is your lactate heart rate your max heart rate? No. So your max heart rate is if you're going to do a 5K race and you go out and you run it as hard as you can run it, your max heart rate would be the highest heart rate that you hit in that 5K race. Your lactate heart rate would be what you can hold, your average heart rate over the course of an hour. So, okay, we all know that a 5K race doesn't go an hour, but you can do a calculation with 20 minutes. So a lot of people can't do a 5K in under 20 minutes. So you could take your average heart rate for 20 minutes times 0.95% and get your lactate heart rate. If you were doing a half marathon, that would be longer than an hour. You could find out what your highest average heart rate is for an hour and figure out what your lactate heart rate would be there. I hope I answered your question, Mary. Mary also asked, what is the best power meter to get for a newbie? Okay, so you've touched upon an area of my heart. I have found a power meter that I absolutely love. I've tried a few power meters in the past, and I actually have the box right here. So it's Favero Asamimo, and you can get a single-sided pedal power meter. I believe for about, I think I got this for about $450. You can get the dual-sided for a little bit more money, but I'm absolutely in love with this power meter. When athletes ask me what is my favorite power meter, I direct them to this, and I probably have 6 athletes with this power meter. And it's great because they are pedals. You can move them from bike to bike, and you can have power on multiple bikes, which is pretty cool. So, any other questions? I don't see any other questions. So, feel free to ask away. Okay, Bree asked the question, what is the best drink mix tablet to get for a first timer to this? I always just drink water and eat bagels. Okay, so you're a water drinker. Okay, Bree, listen, water does your body absolutely no good. It has no sodium in it. It has no potassium in it. Has no carbohydrates in it. It does absolutely nothing for your body except for add fluid to your body. But your body needs sodium. Your body needs carbohydrates. And if you're just eating the bagel, think of it this way. If you're eating a bagel and you're putting down that bagel while you're working out or while you're racing, you have to remember that the blood in your body kind of diverts away from your stomach and actually works its way out to the skin so that it can kind of help cool you down. So the digestion of food doesn't happen that fast. So if you were to eat a bagel, if I would eat a bagel right now in front of you, I wouldn't see the benefits of those carbohydrates for the bagel for probably for 2.5 to 3 hours. So you really want to have sports drinks that kind of fuel your workouts. And so that's kind of the reason why I suggested these sport drinks here, because they all kind of have the proper sodium, potassium, carbohydrates that would fuel your workouts. So I'm not a fan of water because your body, like I said, it goes into your small intestine. Your small intestine goes, I don't know what to do with this. I need a certain concentration of electrolytes so that I can pass it into your bloodstream. So keep that in mind. And I would highly recommend that you kind of go with a sport drink, and definitely you can add a gel too on top of that. So, Mary asked the question, what is the brand? I'm assuming you mean the power meter. The power meter brand is the Favero Asamimo. So it's an Italian brand. They sell it on Amazon. They also sell it on their own website. I think if you buy it off their website, you save $50. So take a look. It's it's cycling.favero.com. So that is my favorite power meter. A question came from Cape Cod Tri Watch Party. Someone always gets side stitches on run. Any suggestions? Okay, so side stitches. One physical thing that has always worked for me, and side stitches, some people will say it's kind of like an anomaly, but one of the things that works for me in side stitches is that if I'm going out on a run, I used to get them early on when I was probably early on when I didn't have as much endurance experience under my belt. And one of the things that I found really works well for me is that I'll stop and I'll inhale, and I will puff out I will inhale as much air as possible. I will try to be like a fat person, stick out my belly and bring in as much air into my chest as possible. And I found that when I do that once or twice, it kind of makes that side stitch go away. So that's one thing that you can think about. A lot of times, though, a side stitch is... there is unknowns to side stitches, but a lot of times I think the consensus out there is that it's kind of poor nutrition, and so you should really kind of reevaluate what you're taking in for a sports drink. And I think If you take in the right sports drinks, you add in a little bit more endurance, you become more of a little bit seasoned, more of a seasoned athlete, unless you already are. You try that, and then you stretch out. That seemed to help me in the past, so you can give that a shot. Michelle wrote, "You're saying to drink these just during the workout, though, right? Not all day, every day." Yes, you are correct. So during your workouts, you want to be fueling with, the sport drinks that I kind of recommended earlier. But yeah, you're correct. During your normal, normal life, you don't need to be walking around drinking sports drinks all day long. It's really, you're just looking to fuel your workout. So maybe before you work out, you take some of your sports drink. During your workout, you're taking your sports drink. And then after your workout, you do have a period of time. They say there's a 30-minute window there where you should be really refueling, which will help you prepare for your next workout. So don't miss that 30-minute window where your body kind of sucks in all of those carbohydrates and sodium and potassium and nutrients, and you're really kind of refueling your body so that the next time you work out, you're ready to rock and roll. So, Michelle, Bree, not far behind you. So, all right. Any other questions before I let you go for today? Okay. I don't see any other questions here. If you do have any questions or you think of any questions, once I end this Facebook Live, please feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. My email address is rhatch at triumph, TRIUMPH, endurance, ENDURANCE, coaching.com. So you can reach me via email there. You can also check out my Facebook page, Triumph Endurance Coaching. You can also check out my website, triumphendurancecoaching.com. And you can reach me all three ways. So I'd be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you think of after we get off of this session. But outside of that, have a great day, and thank you so much for having me, and I hope you found this beneficial. All right, have a good day. Bye-bye.